What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the shopping complex where they threw that party, the one with the valet and the open bar and the marble floors, was financed through my company, every square foot of it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Walter Hess. I'm 63 years old. I came to this country from a small town outside of Stuttgart, Germany, when I was 22 with $400, a second-hand winter coat, and enough stubbornness to outlast anyone who told me I didn't belong here. I worked nights loading freight at a distribution warehouse in Cincinnati while taking accounting classes during the day. I ate a lot of peanut butter sandwiches. I learned English from the television in my apartment. The landlord had left it behind, and from the guys on my shift who thought my accent was funny but taught me poker anyway. I built things slowly. That's the only way I know. I didn't have connections. I didn't have a family name that meant anything to anyone in Ohio. What I had was patience and a head for numbers that my father, a watchmaker, had drilled into me before I ever set foot on a plane. By the time my daughter Emily was born, I owned a small commercial real estate firm. Nothing flashy. Refinanced small businesses, strip malls, medical office buildings. Boring stuff. The kind of work that doesn't make headlines but quietly, steadily, builds something real. My wife passed when Emily was 11, breast cancer, 2 years from diagnosis to the end. And after that it was just the two of us. I raised her the way my father raised me. Honest work, no shortcuts, and never ever let anyone make you feel like you're less than you are because of where you started. Emily turned out better than anything I ever built. She became a pediatric nurse. Worked at Cincinnati Children's. She had this way with kids where they'd stop crying the moment she walked in the room. I used to joke that she got it from her mother, not me. She met Connor Ashworth at a friend's wedding 3 years ago. He was 32, good-looking in that self-satisfied way some men have, and his family owned a chain of upscale kitchen showrooms across the Midwest, the kind of stores that sell refrigerators that cost more than a used car. His father, Lawrence Ashworth, had built the business from one location in Columbus, and somewhere along the way the family had decided that success entitled them to have opinions about other people's worth. The first time Emily brought Connor home for dinner, he sat at my kitchen table and talked for 45 minutes about the Ashworth showroom expansion into Nashville without once asking me what I did for a living. I made pot roast. He ate it and said the seasoning was interesting. I smiled and told him I'd gotten the recipe from my mother. He nodded like that was quaint. Emily was happy. That was the part I held on to. She laughed differently around him, lighter somehow, and she'd started talking about the future in a way she hadn't since her mother died. So I kept my observations to myself. I'm good at that. Patience, remember. The engagement happened about 18 months after they met. Connor proposed at a restaurant I'd never heard of. Apparently it had a 2-month wait list and a tasting menu that ran $400 a head. Emily called me that night, and I could hear in her voice that she was genuinely happy, and that was enough. I told her I was proud of her, and I meant it. The dinner to meet the Ashworths was set for a Saturday in late October. Lawrence had a membership at a private club in Hyde Park, the Castlebrook Club, one of those old Cincinnati institutions where the carpets are burgundy and the waitstaff call you "sir" before you've said a word. Emily told me it was formal. I wore the dark blue suit I keep for occasions. It had been my signing suit. Every significant contract I'd closed in the last 15 years, I'd worn that suit. I drove myself there. I parked in the lot and walked in, and the Metro directed me to a private dining room in the back where the Ashworths were already seated. Lawrence at the head of the table, naturally. His wife Helen beside him, a thin woman with the kind of careful smile that never quite reaches the eyes. Connor, and his younger brother Garrett, who worked in the family business and had apparently inherited his father's habit of assessing people like they were items on an inventory list. Emily was already there. She stood up when she saw me and hugged me in that way she has, with both arms fully committed, and I could feel her hoping it would go well. Lawrence stood and shook my hand. Firm grip, deliberate, the kind of handshake that's trying to establish something. Walter, he said, not Mr. Murr. Hess, Walter. Right away. We've heard a lot about you. Good things, I hope, I said. He smiled. Of course. We sat down. The wine came. Lawrence ordered without asking anyone's preference, a bottle of something French that ran. I later noticed on the itemized receipt Connor insisted on splitting, about $380. I don't drink much. I took a glass and let it sit. The conversation started easily enough. Helen asked about Emily's work at the hospital. Connor talked about the Nashville expansion. Garrett mentioned a golf tournament he played in Hilton Head. Then Lawrence looked at me across the table with that particular expression I've seen before, the one that precedes a question designed to establish a hierarchy rather than gather information. And he said, "So Walter, Emily mentioned you're in real estate?" "Commercial real estate finance," I said. "Small to mid-sized properties mostly." He nodded slowly. "Local stuff, mostly regional, yes." He picked up his wine. "Good, honest work." The way he said honest landed like a compliment with a thumbtack inside it. I took a sip of water. Connor cleared his throat. Dad was actually curious about the wedding timeline. Emily and I have been talking about next September, and there are some things we wanted to discuss. Emily looked at me and something in her expression shifted. I saw it and filed it away. Lawrence set down his glass. "We want to throw them a proper wedding. Our son's wedding should reflect who he is, who this family is. We're thinking the Montgomery, that's the event venue we use for corporate functions, and a guest list of probably 350, 400. I did the math quickly. A wedding for 400 at a venue like the Montgomery? I knew the property, actually. My firm had done preliminary financing conversations with them 2 years before they went with another lender, would run somewhere between $180,000 and $240,000, depending on the catering tier. "That sounds like quite a celebration," I said. "It will be," Lawrence said. He folded his hands on the table in a way that was almost professorial. "We expect to carry the majority of the costs, of course. The Ashworth side, but traditionally, the bride's family contributes." He paused. "We'd want the contribution to be meaningful, in keeping with the scale of the event." "How much are you thinking?" I asked, calmly, because I genuinely wanted to hear him say it out loud. He glanced at Connor, then back at me. "We feel a contribution of $80,000 from your side would be appropriate." The table was quiet for a moment. Helen was studying her salad plate. Garrett was looking at me with that inventory expression. Connor was looking at Emily. Emily was looking at me. I set my fork down. I picked up my water glass, drank, set it back down. Then I said, "Lawrence, can I ask what that number is based on?" He seemed mildly surprised that I'd asked, which told me he hadn't expected pushback. The scale of the event, the venue cost, specifically. I kept my voice completely level. "What information do you have about my financial situation that led you to arrive at $80,000 as an appropriate number?" A slight pause. "We're not trying to put you in a difficult position." "I didn't say you were. I'm asking about the methodology." Lawrence's expression cooled by a few degrees. "Emily mentioned your firm. We did a little research. Commercial real estate in this area. It's a stable business. Nothing extraordinary. We assumed—" "You assumed," I said. "We made a reasonable estimate." I nodded. I looked at Emily, who was very still. I looked at Connor, who had the decency to appear uncomfortable. Then I looked back at Lawrence Ashworth, and I smiled the way I've learned to smile in 40 years of business, the smile that doesn't move up to the eyes, and I said, "I'll need to think about it." Lawrence looked like he'd expected a different answer. Either yes or an embarrassing no. He hadn't expected "I'll need to think about it" delivered without a single tremor in the voice. "Of course," he said. "Take your time. The rest of the dinner was polite, surface level, the kind of conversation that exists to fill space. I ate the duck. I complimented the wine I didn't drink. I shook Lawrence's hand again at the end of the evening and told him it was a pleasure. On the drive home, Emily called me from her car. "Dad, I am so sorry. I didn't know he was going to." "How long have you known this was coming?" I asked. A pause. "Connor mentioned it about a week ago. I told him I didn't think it was right. I should have warned you." "Yes," I said. "You should have." I said it gently because I understood the position she'd been in. "Are you okay?" "I'm embarrassed." "Don't be embarrassed on my behalf." "I'm not embarrassed. I meant it." "Are you happy, Emily?" "With Connor." She took a moment. "I love him, Dad. His father is who he is." "That's fair," I said. "Get some sleep. We'll talk more this week." I hung up and drove the rest of the way home in silence, thinking. Here is what I knew that the Ashworths did not. Hess Commercial Group, my company, had, over the course of 38 years, quietly financed or co-financed 61 commercial properties across Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. Strip malls, yes. Medical buildings, yes. But also, in the last decade, larger acquisitions, mixed-use developments, a hotel conversion in Covington, several retail anchors. We were not a flashy firm. We did not take out ads. We did not sponsor galas. I had spent 4 decades deliberately keeping a low profile because, in my experience, the best negotiating position is the one where the other party underestimates you. Among our portfolio, a 40% financing stake in the Montgomery Event Center, the very venue Lawrence Ashworth intended to use for his son's wedding. I had not mentioned this at dinner. There had been no reason to, but there was a reason now. I didn't call Lawrence the next day or the day after. I let the week pass. I had my assistant send a brief note, a physical note, because I'm 63 and I still believe in paper, thanking the Ashworths for dinner and indicating that I was giving the matter careful consideration. On the Thursday of the following week, I called my contact at the Montgomery. His name is Frank, and he has managed that venue for 11 years. And we have a relationship built on exactly the kind of straightforward dealing that I try to bring to everything. I asked him to check whether a Connor Ashworth or Lawrence Ashworth had made any reservation or deposit inquiries. Frank called me back within the hour. They had. A preliminary inquiry for the 3rd weekend of September, the following year. No deposit yet. A follow-up meeting scheduled. I told Frank I'd be in touch. Then I called my attorney, a woman named Judith, who has worked with me for 22 years, and who understands that when I ask her to review something, I've already thought it through. I asked her to pull our shareholder agreement with the Montgomery and confirm the terms of our approval rights on major contracts. She called back that afternoon. The agreement was exactly as I remembered. As a 40% equity partner, our firm held co-approval rights on contracts over a certain threshold. A wedding of 400 guests at premium tier would clear that threshold comfortably. I did not immediately do anything with this information. That's important to understand. I wasn't sitting in my office plotting. I was waiting to see whether this situation resolved itself the way I hoped it would, with Connor having a genuine conversation with his father, and Lawrence extending the kind of basic respect that one adult owes another. What happened instead was that Connor called Emily and told her his father was getting impatient for an answer. Emily called me, and I could hear the stress in her voice, the way she was trying to hold 2 things at once, her love for Connor and her discomfort with being caught in the middle of this. She asked me what I was going to do. "I haven't decided yet," I said, "but I need you to do something for me." "What?" "I need you to tell me honestly, not what you think I want to hear, whether Connor has stood up to his father about this, even once." The pause before she answered was its own answer. He told his dad that maybe the number was too high. Did he tell him it was wrong to ask at all? Another pause. No. I thanked her and told her I'd handle it. I called Lawrence Ashworth's office that afternoon. His assistant put me through. Lawrence came on the line with the ease of a man who assumes the call is going the direction he wants it to go. "Walter, good to hear from you." "Lawrence." I kept my voice warm. "Neutral. I've given your proposals some thought, and I'm not going to be contributing $80,000 to the wedding." A brief silence. "I see." His voice dropped a register, losing the ease. "Is it a matter of we could discuss the number?" It was a starting point. "It's not the number," I said. "The number could be $8 and my answer would be the same. The way the ask was made wasn't acceptable to me." I could hear him recalibrating. "Walter, I hope you understand we weren't trying to—" "I'm not calling to argue about intent," I said. "I'm calling because I think you should have some information before your son makes his venue deposit." "What information?" "Hess Commercial Group holds a 40% financing stake in the Montgomery Event Center. Per our shareholder agreement, we hold co-approval rights on premium tier event contracts. I'd recommend Connor verify that before the family moves forward with the deposit." The silence that followed was a different quality from the others. Longer. More textured. "I wasn't aware of that," he finally said. "Most people aren't," I said. "I don't advertise it. You mentioned you did some research on my firm. You may have missed that one. It's not on the website." Another pause. "Are you saying you would block the venue?" "I'm saying I think you should have accurate information about who you're dealing with before you proceed. What you do with that information is up to you." I let that sit for a moment, then added, "I'll also mention, separately, that the commercial building that houses your Columbus flagship showroom, the Delwood Retail Center on Henderson Road, has been in our portfolio since 2019. The lease renewal comes up in 14 months. This time the silence was very long. "Lawrence," I said, not unkindly, "I'm not a man who throws his weight around. I've never needed to. But I'm also not a man who lets someone mistake patience for weakness. You made assumptions about me based on incomplete information. That's fine, it happens. I'm giving you the complete information now. That's a courtesy." His voice, when it came back, was careful. "What is it that you want, Walter?" "I want to attend my daughter's wedding without this conversation having happened," I said. "I want Connor to build a marriage with Emily based on what I've seen him be at his best, which is a decent young man who loves my daughter, and not on what his father has decided he's entitled to. And I want you to call Emily personally and tell her that the matter of financial contribution is closed and has been handled. You don't need to tell her how." Another long pause. "That's all, that's all." I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, the sound of a man rearranging something inside himself. "I'll make the call," he said. "I appreciate that," I said. "Give my best to Helen." I hung up and sat at my desk for a while. The late afternoon light was coming through the window at that low October angle, and I thought about my wife. I think about her a lot in October. Something about the light. I thought about what she would have said about all of it. She would have said I was too patient for too long and too final when I finally moved. She was probably right. She usually was. Emily called me that evening. Her voice was different, lighter in a way that took me a minute to place, and then I recognized it as relief. "Connor's dad called me," she said. "Oh?" "He said he was actually pretty gracious about it, which surprised me. He said the conversation about the wedding contribution was a mistake, and that he hoped it hadn't caused problems, and that the wedding plans were going to proceed on the Ashworth side without any expectation from our family." "That's good," I said. "Dad, what did you do?" "I had a conversation with him." "That's not an answer. It's the answer I have for you right now. Maybe someday over dinner I'll tell you the longer version." I paused. "Are you okay?" "I'm good," she said. And then quieter, "Thank you. You don't need to thank me." "I know, but I want to." After we hung up, I made myself dinner. Actual pot roast. The same recipe I'd made for Connor that first night. because I find cooking methodical and I needed methodical. And I ate at the kitchen table where my wife and I used to eat, where Emily used to do her homework, where I once sat up until 2 in the morning trying to understand a financing structure that almost bankrupted us in 2004, and then finally understood it and knew we'd be okay. I'm not a man who needs to be recognized. That was never the point. I built what I built quietly, and I'll finish it quietly. And the people who matter will know what was real and what wasn't. What I needed, the only thing I ever needed from Lawrence Ashworth, was for him to extend to me the basic dignity of one adult to another. Not because of what I own, because of what any person is owed before you've learned a single thing about them. Emily got married the following September. The venue was not the Montgomery. They chose a renovated barn property about 40 minutes outside Cincinnati that Emily had found herself, with string lights and wood floors and room for 130 people, and it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Lawrence gave a toast that was genuinely warm. He shook my hand before the reception and held it a beat longer than necessary, and looked at me in a way that men of a certain generation use when they want to acknowledge something without saying it out loud. I looked back at him the same way. Connor danced with Emily to a song her mother used to sing around the house when Emily was small. I had told him about it, quietly, 2 weeks before the wedding, and he had tracked down the original recording and learned the name of it and talked to the DJ himself. When I saw Emily's face in that moment, when she realized what song it was, I had to look away for a while. I found a quiet spot near the edge of the barn and stood there for a few minutes, watching my daughter dance, and I thought about my father in his watchmaker's shop, and the $400 and the peanut butter sandwiches and all the slow, unglamorous years it takes to build something that lasts. I thought it was enough. It was more than enough. And I thought, she knows never to apologize for where she comes from. She learned it somewhere. I hope it was from me. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately, not in any mystical sense. Just the plain, observable way that what a person puts into the world tends to come back around, sooner or later, in one form or another. Lawrence Ashworth walked into that dinner at the Castlebrook Club having already decided who I was. He'd done his research, he said. He'd made a reasonable estimate. But what he'd actually done was look at the surface of something and conclude he understood the whole of it. That's not research. That's assumption, wearing research as clothing. An assumption, in my experience, is the most expensive habit a person can have. Here's what I've learned in 63 years. The people who underestimate you are rarely doing it out of malice. Lawrence wasn't a villain. He was a man who had spent decades in rooms where his name opened doors, and over time he'd started to believe that the doors opened because of something essential about him rather than something circumstantial. That's a quiet kind of corruption. It doesn't announce itself. It just slowly convinces you that the map you're holding is the territory. I didn't set out to build leverage over that man. I built a business, steadily, without fanfare, over nearly 4 decades, because I believed in the work, and because I had a daughter who was watching how I moved through the world. Every decision I made in my professional life, I made knowing that Emily was learning something from it, whether I intended her to or not. That's the weight of parenthood that nobody warns you about. Not the sleepless nights when they're infants, the long, invisible lesson of just being who you are in front of them for 20, 30 years running. What happened with Lawrence was simply the result of those decades meeting his assumptions at a specific point in time. I didn't manufacture the situation. I just refused to pretend I was who he'd decided I was. That's the whole of it. There's something I want to say about patience because I think it gets misunderstood. People confuse patience with passivity. They're not the same thing. Passivity is waiting because you don't know what else to do. Patience is waiting because you understand timing, because you know the difference between the moment to act and the moment to observe. Lawrence mistook my patience for weakness, and that mistake cost him more than it cost me. The thing about integrity, about spending decades doing what you say you'll do, treating people honestly, building things that actually work, is that it accumulates, not loudly, not in ways that show up on a surface reading. But when the moment comes that requires it, it's there, all of it, right there, quietly waiting to be useful. I think about Connor sometimes and what I hope he took from all of this. Not the mechanics of what I did, but the underlying principle that the kind of man you want to be in extraordinary moments is built entirely from who you are in ordinary ones. You don't get to switch it on. It's either there because you put it there over years of small, consistent choices, or it isn't. Emily knew who I was. She'd always known. And watching her dance at her wedding in that barn with the string lights to a song her mother used to sing, I understood that whatever I'd built in my life, that moment was the return on the truest investment I ever made. That's enough. That's more than enough.